Afternoon, everyone. Delay today because of circumstances, but we're with you today on Friday with the HockeyDebates.com podcast. I'm Bob Duff, and I'm, as always, joined by Kevin Allen, the Hall of Fame hockey writer. And today we're going to be joined by Ezra Ginsburg, who's going to talk all about the Winnipeg Jets. You may know him as the host of the Legal Curve podcast, and we're going to talk Winnipeg Jets and what's going on with that team and whether they've got a chance in a potential Canadian division. So we'll be right back with you. And here we are. And Ezra, I'll start you right off. What do you think about what the Jets have done since last season? Do you feel they're an improved team?
Absolutely. I think, addressing the second line center position is something that you guys know it was something really big for the Jets. And, they go back to a familiar face in Paul Stastny, and even though it's only on a one-year deal, I think that that's exactly what the Jets needed. They needed a veteran presence up the middle. He has familiarity, even though the line mates might change. There's a lot of talk here in Winnipeg about Patrick Laine moving into that top line and Blake Wheeler playing on the second line, but he's got a lot of experience with both Patrick Laine and Nicholas Ehlers, a lot of success. Back in 2018 when they went on that run. So I think that move alone makes the Jets a better team. And bringing back Dylan DeMello, guys, he's not a guy that puts up big offensive numbers, but, he really stabilizes the back end because, Josh Morrissey was struggling big time in the first half of the season. And when the Jets acquired DeMello from Ottawa, it was like night and day. The penalty kill was better. The Jets' defense was better. So bringing back DeMello on a nice contract, it was also a really good move, and there were some other, depth signings. But overall, I think the Jets addressed some needs, and even though there might be a few minor deals to come, later on in November and December, I think, if you look at the Jets on paper, now they're a much better team than they were, against Calgary in the qualification round.
Ezra, in our country right now, we're talking a lot about conspiracy theories. And when I hear the Patrick Laine trade rumors, and then I talk to GMs about them, it's the same thing. You hear a rumor and they say, well, it's not us. And, I've got a lot of it's not us's that they're talking to, which leads me to believe, is there anything to this? I mean, is there any chance at all to be traded? Or is this one of those things where, they've kind of let that go just in case he decides that he wants too much money or he doesn't want to play in Winnipeg? Yeah,
Kevin, I'm with you. I on our show, when these rumors first started to come out, of course, it started with, the trade bait board and, Frank Saravelli, who's a great reporter. And then it continued with, Pierre LeBrun's reporting coming from Patrick Laine's agent saying that, it was inevitable that Laine was moving on. But I think at this point in the Jets' evolution, it makes absolutely no sense to trade a guy like Laine, and we all know it's simply because what he does is just something that you're not going to be able to acquire. It's a generational scorer, maybe not a generational talent like a Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, but definitely one of the top goal scorers in the league. So I can't say that it's not something that's ever going to happen, because the only reason most people can come up with that for Laine being traded is that the Jets and Laine's can't come to an agreement on a long-term contract. Aside from that, it doesn't make any sense at all.
And you think, you draft a guy number 2 overall, obviously you're thinking he's going to have a long future with your franchise. And you think teams would have learned a lesson from what Boston did with Tyler Seguin and giving up on him so early, and he looked pretty good in a Bruins uniform right now.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time, it looked like it was probably, the right decision by Peter Chiarelli, but we know that Tyler Seguin, is still one of the best forwards in the league. And, even though he struggled in the playoffs with the Stars, that was a move that isn't looking good right now. But when you're talking about Laine, it's tough to forget that he's still 22 years old. And it's something that, especially guys, when you consider that the Jets have never attracted and probably never will, even though I'm a proud Winnipegger, the Jets will never attract the top-end free agents. It's not realistic to think an Alex Pietrangelo or a Taylor Hall or players of that ilk are going to sign here. It's the reality. I mean, the Jets have done a very nice job of retaining their own players. The Mark Scheifele, Connor Hellebucks, Blake Wheelers, they've all signed long-term contracts. But because the Jets aren't going to be that, destination like, a Vegas or a Tampa Bay or some of the other top destinations, trading away a player like Laine, I think, scares a lot of Jets fans, because when the Jets won that lottery and got the second overall pick, it was basically like, guaranteeing a playoff spot for 10 years. So, I think most people in Winnipeg are hoping that the Jets don't trade Laine. But as we talked about earlier, if the Jets aren't willing to pay Laine $9 million a year, that might be their only option.
The difference between the Seguin situation in Boston and the Laine is, and we had no idea what Seguin was going to be. He hadn't yet developed into the scorer, and Laine is already established. Like, we know what he is already, and even if he does nothing else but just be a dynamic goal scorer, as you alluded to earlier, those are in such short supply in an offensive era when we're scrambling to get goals. I just can't even imagine that there's any return you could get that would give you such a unique piece that Laine is. And do you think, I would assume, because they're Canadians, they understand in Winnipeg that you'll never get a fair return for Laine.
Exactly. And, I agree with you 100%, Kevin. And, Drew, the host of the show, he said this at the time, when those rumors started about, I think it was about 7 weeks ago, unless you're getting, Jack Eichel or Seth Jones coming the other way, it's going to be really tough. And, the knock is obvious on Laine in terms of the defensive part of his game. But if you watched Laine last year, he improved leaps and bounds over his first 3 years in the league. And even if he is a one-dimensional player, that one dimension is better than 99% of the other league. There are only a few other guys in the league, Alex Ovechkin, Nikita Kucherov, a few other guys, David Pasternak. He's up in the top 5 goal scorers in the league. And I think most people would agree that 50 goals is definitely in the future for Laine. So it's really hard to see the Jets trading him, but, the rumors are out there. So, it's something that's gone away now. And when the Jets acquired Stastny, it seemed to quiet down for a bit. But I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on, going into training camp and the season, whenever that happens.
Do you think some of these rumors just get more life today than they did maybe in the past because of social media? Because it keeps them alive, and especially in the off season when hockey fans don't have much to talk about, then they start, and everybody's got their own. You talk about conspiracy theories, Kevin. Everybody's got their own trade scenario that. I think they've played too much fantasy sports, and they think, if we trade them 8 mediocre guys from our team, we can get their 2 best players.
100%. Like social media, in many respects in life these days, it can be a very polarizing and a very nasty place, and it just fuels the fire. And what was really, amazing about when Laine first appeared on the trade bait board is that Nikolai Ehlers was also on that trade bait board, which was even more surprising because, of course, he's under contract for another, I think it's 5 more years at $6 million AAV, which is widely considered a great contract signing by Chevy. So it made even less sense that Ehlers was on that trade bait board. So even though I know Frank and he's a really good reporter, as I mentioned, and a good person. We were scratching our heads as to why Ehlers was on there, let alone Laine. Laine, because he's in the last year of his contract, made a little bit more sense. But I think absolutely, when this stuff starts to spread on social media, it gets pretty ugly. And there are a lot of insecure Jets fans, and the Laine rumors didn't help.
Ezra, when I look at the potential All-Canadian division, Bob and I have talked about this. My theory is, and we had Jim Matheson on, and he felt exactly the same way as I did. We're entering a really good time for Canadian teams. Like, they're all on an upward trend, including the Ottawa Senators. Although, I don't think this season they would be able to compete, but I think we all liked what Pierre Dorion did in the offseason. And, I look at the Winnipeg team, and their advantage is, certainly in net. Like, if you're sizing up the goaltending in that division, you can't do better than the Vezina Trophy winner in terms of goaltending. And, right now, just in terms of the way they played last season, you got to, say the Winnipeg Jets have the best goaltending, even though Carey Price sits in Montreal. Do you think in an all-Canadian division that Winnipeg's, as I do, that Winnipeg is just as capable of winning as anybody else?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, we actually, had that debate on our show. And, I still think on paper, the Toronto Maple Leafs, even though it pains me to say it, I think on paper, especially with some of the moves they made in the offseason, the Leafs are the most talented team. But after that, I think it's completely wide open. And if you asked, 10 people, you'd probably get, 10 different rankings. And I agree with you, Kevin, in terms of the Senators. I think they're going to be one of the most interesting teams to watch. And whenever you bring in guys like Galchenyuk and Dadonov, and not to mention Matt Murray, you're going to be, an exciting team to watch and better than you were last year. But, in terms of teams like Vancouver, Edmonton, the Jets, I'd throw in, Calgary in there. I think there's so much parity. And, I think it would not only be exciting for fans, but I think the competition would be just absolutely fierce. So I would agree with that, and even though I, as I mentioned, I think the Leafs are probably the most talented team, when you look at the goaltending, Freddie Anderson's a great goaltender, but I don't even know if he would be, the fourth best goalie in that division, right? So,
yeah.
The Leafs definitely don't have the edge in goal. The Jets do, and now with Jacob Markstrom in Calgary, they've addressed, an area of weakness that they've had going back to, the Mika Kiprusoff days. So I think there are a lot of fans, not just in Canada, but in the U.S. that are excited about the divisional realignment or the potential divisional realignment. When you consider you could have, a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Central Division, causing a little bit of havoc in there. So, I think the Jets can be a playoff team if there's a Canadian division, because I think they're just as talented as most of the teams.
What's interesting about that is, here the Edmonton Oilers have two of the top 5 players in the game, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but their goaltending ranks probably 6th or 7th in that all Canadian division.
Yeah, absolutely. It could even be bottom 5. I think Mike Smith has had a nice career, but I think when you had the opportunity to bring in a Braden Holtby or a Corey Crawford, a couple of goalies that at this point in their careers, have a lot more to give than Mike Smith. Even though Mike Smith, did do a nice job in Edmonton last year, it's just not an improvement, and it doesn't put you, up there with some of the other, really strong teams in that division and, in the league in general. So I agree with you. I think I like the moves the Oilers made. I really like Tyson Barrie. I even think bringing in Kyle Turris as a third line center is a nice move. And Jesse Puljujarvi comes back, and he should be a guy that they have in their top 6. But the goaltending is definitely a question mark for sure.
Ezra, we've heard a lot of talk this week about when and if and how the league might come back. They're still targeting January 1st, but in the last couple of days, we've heard some alarming details about potential financial hits the players are going to be asked to take. They were originally agreed to a 20% deferral, 25% escrow. Now they agreed to 10 and 20, and now the reports are they want 20 and 25, the owners. And I was looking up some of the owners because it seems like the fans always side with the owners in these money issues. And I can't say I'm shocked by it, but I'm surprised to learn that David Thompson, owner of the Jets, is actually the richest NHL owner. And this was a 2019 Forbes story, but he was listed then at a net worth of $38.9 billion with a B dollars. And that shocks me for 2 reasons, because A, he's, it's a Canadian team that's considered small market, and B, he's in the media business. And as Kevin and I have both been declared redundant reporters by our newspapers, we were told there's no money in the media business. But if the number one owner in terms of cash in the NHL is a media baron. So, obviously we don't expect him to spend all $38.9 billion on the Jets, but it seems like these owners could afford to bite the bullet just as much as the players.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, both of you are definitely not redundant. Let me put that out there right off the bat. That is not true. And I can confirm that, from doing the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on TSN 1290, there isn't a lot of money in media. Something we do because we love it. We all have full-time jobs as well. But Winnipeg is never going to be considered a big market. But that's right. I mean, David Thompson is one of the wealthiest people, not only in Canada, but in the world. And his partnership with, Mark Chipman was one of the reasons why they were able to bring the Jets back. But I think in this particular case, I think people have to kind of side with the players a little bit here. Bob, I agree. I mean, I think that was a big concession to defer, 10% of your paycheck, and then to be asked to defer another 10%. And I think you guys would agree that there's probably going to be a middle ground here, but that's a big concession for the players. And especially considering that CBA was negotiated, 5 months ago, or less than that, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. It seems like the NHL players are probably going to want to negotiate this a little bit more. But I think at the end of the day, hockey fans don't really want to talk about, escrow and deferrals and stuff like that. I think hockey fans at this point just want to know when the season's going to start, right? So I just hope that they're able to reach an agreement, in the next week or two, because if they want to start the season in early January, which, some people think is optimistic, I'd be one of those people. They better get this deal done pretty soon.
All right. Well, if people want to hear more about the Jets, they should tune into the Illegal Curve show on TSN 1290 in Winnipeg, as you mentioned, and with the magic of the internet, you can listen to it from anywhere now. And if you're a Jets fan who's not in Manitoba, then find it on the web. And if you are, tune it in. And we want to thank Ezra for joining us today. And we'll be watching those Jets, and hopefully this year in the playoffs, they'll stay healthy.
Thanks for the invite, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, right. Thanks for being on, Ezra.
Thank you.
So it is a tough, Kevin, it is a tough call when you look at, it's the old millionaires versus billionaires battle. But our good friend Ken Campbell kind of laid it out in the Hockey News. I thought it was a great article that talked about, he took a player earning the minimum, $700,000. And the example he used was Phil DiGiuseppe. Now, he's, one of the players not only making the minimum, but a guy who hasn't made a lot of money yet, so he's not a millionaire. And he did all the breakdown on the new numbers the NHL is asking the players to accept. And his $700,000 minus 25% escrow and the 26% deferral, and then the standard 52% taxes, he's left with $186,000. Now, we'd both be happy to make $186,000 a year, but you got to remember, with athletes, they don't make that kind of money for long. It's not like, every other job where you're probably going to keep it for 40 or 50 years. Most of them average around 5 years in the league. So to ask a guy, to give up that significant amount of money right now, and granted it's in the middle of a pandemic, but I think the owners have to show what they're giving up at the same time.
Yeah, this is a complicated issue. Let me say up front that I generally side with players in labor battles, just because they're the show. Yes, the owners take risk and they need to be rewarded for that. But without the talent, they're no different than movie stars. When Meryl Streep is in a movie, people go see it. And when Connor McDavid is in town, people want to go see, Connor McDavid. So just let me say that up front. And sometimes there are issues where certainly ownership is deserving of some concessions. Like I understood at least, why they wanted a salary cap. They wanted costs that they at least knew what they were going to be from year to year. But let's get to the bigger issue here, and that is, and I thought it's one that you brought up. Now, the question is whether or not an owner, just because he's the richest man in the world, is he obligated to spend his money and lose money on that team? Now, on the face of that, you would think, at least if you're an American in a capitalistic system, well, no, he isn't. He can make a decision not to put his money into that Winnipeg Jets team. That's part of being an owner. But I argue actually that he does. Like, I think when you buy a sports team, even though it's not written in the contract, you're kind of accepting the fact that you have bought a public trust, that there's an understanding that it's like, buying a historic house that's been determined to be, and you have an obligation to keep that house the way it is. And I think the same is true of a sports franchise. When you buy that, that's not an ordinary business. That you've got a bunch of fans who are dependent upon the decisions you make. They expect you to be competitive. So I do think you're obligated to spend more than you want to spend, or more than that. So that's my first answer on that. And the second thing is I think this will get resolved. And I think it'll get resolved because the players don't have much leverage here. And I think it is reprehensible that we're, a few months into this new deal and they got their hands out. However, I don't think we could have anticipated how bad it was going to be in terms of the losses. I think some people thought there was a chance we were going to see fans this season. And if there are no fans, and right now it's looking like there won't be any fans because they're talking about the vaccine available to the masses, not the people who need it most. That'll come pretty quickly. But the masses are probably not going to get it until the end of the second quarter or the start of the third quarter, which puts it in the May or June category. So, could we possibly have fans before the playoffs? If at all, probably not. So if that's the case, every game the owners play, they're going to lose money. And the more games they play, the more money they're going to lose. Players, if you play no games, players lose everything, and the owners are actually better off. And that, that's a sad situation, but that's the reality of it. Now, I don't think any owner wants to play no games, because I think they realize that it would hurt the sport to miss the season over this, and especially when it's just a labor issue again. So I think Gary Bettman and Donald Fear are very experienced negotiators. They've been around the block. There's some posturing here. The other thing I didn't like is everybody saw this large elephant in the room for a long time. For a month, we've known where we were headed. We were headed toward a baseball-like squabble over how much money the players were going to get. And, it wasn't up to the players to bring this up. They negotiated a contract. It was up, even though the players knew this was coming, it was up to owners, and they didn't say anything. Now they've waited to the 11th hour, and now there's some pressure on it if they want to start January 1st. And already we've heard the 7 teams that we're hoping, or expecting, I should say, an early start to training camp, because they haven't played a single game or been on the ice since March. And so we've already heard those teams beforehand. And now, I don't know, this could delay it. But I do think because of the experience of Fear and Bettman, I think it'll get done.
Yeah, I mean, that's standard practice, though, isn't it, in labor negotiations? They always wait till the very last minute. But, in this case, because it's all going to be done virtually, there's not going to be any bonus of getting sequestered in a hotel and getting room service and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I do think, the players kind of know the score. Like, I've heard players say it's either this way or we're not going to play. Well, I don't believe that. There's too much money here at stake for the players, and some money is better than no money. So I think there will be some negotiation. If I was the players, I wouldn't give in on this ask either. But as Ezra said, there's probably going to be some sort of compromise. But I'm sure the owners are trying to get a little more, just because it's part and parcel of the game.
I also find it a little bit ridiculous that the same fans who are demanding the players suck it up and take it one for the team so we can have hockey. There's a lot of them are the same people that won't do the proper social distancing or wear a mask or things that could clear this whole mess up, and we could actually go watch games again. So, you want to criticize the players for not doing their part, maybe start doing your own part. And that's obviously not everyone, but Toronto today went on lockdown. Ezra's home province, or Manitoba, is on total lockdown. So, we were able to play in a bubble in Canada in the summer because COVID wasn't bad in Canada. Well, it's bad now. It's bad in Alberta. It's bad in BC. It's bad in Manitoba. It's bad in Quebec. It's bad in Ontario. And those are all places where there are NHL teams. So if this doesn't get under control, I mean, that's the other element in the room. If COVID keeps going on its upward spiral into the winter, is it realistic to play hockey?
Yeah, well, what I would say is, we're probably not going to have anything cataclysmic because baseball has slugged its way through. And I know it's a different sport and they're going to be playing 3 and 4 games. But I think we're going to see a similar reaction. If a player is tested positive, he's going to be hauled out of there along with everybody that he'd been hanging with. And then you won't be able to come back until you've had 3 negative tests. So I think we're going to see players come in and out of the lineup. But it's not going to be clean like it was in bubble hockey. Bubble hockey, everybody stayed in the bubble. We didn't see any positive COVID tests. Nobody snuck in or out. And it was all good. We're not going to see that this season. And I think we are going to have some odd things happen. But, I think they'll get through it. There's rumors that they're going to have 2 weeks or a week and a half set up at the end of the season to play games that that had to be canceled because of COVID. But is that enough? We don't know how many games will be lost. I guess there's a chance it could be overrun, but we got to remember that we're going to start seeing the vaccine leak out, and as more and more vaccine gets into the general public, and it's going to take some time, but we're going to start getting. It's going to stop curtail the spread for sure. But if they're going to start now, they're asking people in America not to travel for Thanksgiving, but the airline industry said we're going to have our biggest day since the pandemic started on Friday as people are going, on Wednesday when people are going home. That means at Christmas our hospitals are going to be overrun. And we're getting 177,000 positive tests a day, and they say there's probably twice as many as that. So, your chances of getting COVID now in America are becoming greater and greater every day.
It's the same. It's the same here in Canada. Even here in Windsor, we went to orange alert, which Canada is one step away from a lockdown. So, it's coming back with a vengeance in Canada, and I think people got complacent. When our numbers were down and looked like we knew what we were doing, and then everybody started going back to bars and restaurants and just living normal life, and now all of a sudden it's running rampant again.
Yeah, it's a shame that. And then there's another issue too that I wrote a column about, and that is and I don't think this. That the league thinks this is a major problem, but I've talked to some teams and it's been brought up in their marketing departments about there is a concern that during this pandemic, for whatever reason, we've lost a little bit of our passion, our energy, our enthusiasm for sports. And that's reflected in our television watching habits. And now, when I say this, all these ratings and how they're synced, I understand there are some extenuating circumstances. There's political implications about people not watching. We're out of season. But there's also some things like, you've heard people say, during this pandemic, I've reconnected with my family. I've found the joy of fixing up my house. And Home Depot's stock is up 25% because a lot of people are doing that. People have got back into exercise and health. And how many of our friends, for me, this is many, have said, I can't believe how much money I'm not spending. And, they've actually been able to save if they have their job, and that's a big if, but if they've had their job, because they're not going out to eat. They're not spending $100 to go to a football game or a hockey game. And, they've sort of gotten used to this new lifestyle. They're reading more. They're doing all that. So meanwhile, we had the NBA finals in Major League Baseball that were all at all-time lows in terms of ratings for their finals. We had the Masters just recently, the worst Masters television ratings since 1957, down 51% from last year. We've had hockey that was down, and even the juggernaut NFL midseason television ratings down 6%. Now, not as dire as some of the other sports, but still down. And I think there are some concerns that when we start back up again, that people are just going to say, boy, I liked having that extra money in my pocket or in my bank account or into my retirement account. And do I really want to pony up with parking and dinner and everything, $300 to go down to the hockey game with my wife or child or buddy? So, we don't know what's going to happen. Now, we have a little bit of indication because when we lost the season in the lockout, they came back strong. Even after a year and a half off, fans came back. So you would think hockey fans would do that, but this is a different animal, and we don't know for sure.
Yeah, I've argued that I think part of the reason why they wanted to get back on the ice and on the playing fields in the midst of this is I think the people who run professional sports and even college sports are a little bit terrified that maybe we might learn to live without them and, not give up on sports, but not live and die with the result of a football game or a hockey game or a baseball game or a basketball game like that. It can be just another entertainment option, like you say, going to the show or going to see theater or not. It can not be a life and death issue as it is with so many people. And I wonder if that isn't an element in why, obviously there's financial considerations, but still, the fact that, gone sometimes is forgotten.
Yeah, well, I think that's a possibility. And I think there's just so much unknown about this because we have no experience with this sort of thing that, it's the fear of the unknown as much as anything else. We just don't know how people are going to react and whether this change is permanent. I mean, we've all sort of experienced sort of a malaise that we're all in right now during this pandemic where, you've just kind of lost your kind of enthusiasm and you're just kind of putting one foot in front of the other. And, half the time you don't even know what day it is, so, it's hard to get excited. I've noticed, the difference for me with regard to college football. I always look forward to watching, the teams in the Big Ten. I'm a Big Ten fan, and I've lost interest in that for whatever reason. I can't tell you why, but I just don't have the same level of passion for it. And my passion for the NFL is probably similar. And I'd like to get hockey going because that's what I, appreciate most. And I think it'll be better. And, now hockey will be in its right time. So if we can get it going in January, we'll be watching games in the middle of winter and it'll feel right again.
Well, before we go, I think we have to touch on the major issue in hockey this week, and that's Braden Holtby's Turtles.
Yeah, I would agree.
If we don't get Braden Holtby's Turtles across the border, the Vancouver Canucks might not have a goalie when the season ends, and that could really affect the balance of power in the Canadian division. But for people who don't know, Braden Holtby has two pet tortoises, Honey and Maple are their names, and his wife Brandy took to social media a couple of days ago to campaign for their release to be allowed to come to Canada because apparently the U.S. It's a Fish and Wildlife organization, whatever part of the government that is, says they need certain paperwork to be able to bring them across the border, and he doesn't have that paperwork. So let's hope that for the sake of the Turtles that and the Holtby's thing, I covered Braden's dad, Greg, when he played gold in Saskatoon, so we've always had a pretty good relationship, Braden and I, and now I'm rooting for him and his Turtles.
I am rooting for the Turtles as well. This is the second podcast that I've done today, and in that one, we rooted for the Turtles as well. I think two countries are rooting for the Turtles, and I've already seen on social media people have offered homes to be foster parents for the turtles until Braden comes back across the border, and so they wouldn't be homeless. But if I'm management, I'd be worried at how Braden would play without his turtles.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and he might go into his shell with it.
Oh yeah. On that note, I think it's time to say goodbye.
Well, and at a time when the world is moving at a snail's pace, we conclude by talking about turtles. It seems appropriate. So this has been the Hockey Debates podcast. He's Kevin. I'm Bob. We'll be back with you on Tuesday to talk some more hockey, and maybe we'll have an update on the turtles for you by then. Everybody,
and we'll talk about the hare and the tortoise next week.
Yes, we will. All right. We'll see you on Tuesday. Have a good weekend, everybody.